Few places are as empty as the center of Australia, or as strange. The first white men came 100 years ago to build a telegraph station. They settled on the edge of a dry river and named the place after a waterhole. They called it Alice Springs. The settlement has grown into a small town with character, a pioneer's town, isolated, an outpost of the 20th century encircled by a land that remains in the Stone Age, primitive and hostile. This, then, is the Alice. Lying in the center of the country, Alice Springs had never been made the crossroads of Australia until a land journey was planned over this course. East-west and north-south crossings linked in a figure-of-8 pattern to cover more than 12,000 miles and a journey to the four corners of the continent. November 1965. These are the men who will make the journey, planning a venture that is as daring as it is long. They will attempt to drive motor cars over a course that has never been mastered before. Not exploring, but following in the tracks of the explorers. Not blazing trails, but linking them. They are test drivers assigned to take cars through the toughest conditions they can find. They've chosen their own course, and they'll use two vehicles. The first objective to the south, in Victoria, is Wilson's Promontory. And here, at the southernmost part of the mainland, the journey begins. The route north lies across the Australian Alps, through melting snow and the remains of the winter falls. The road has been closed to traffic, and drifts block the way for the final 12 miles to the summit, Mount Kosciuszko. The snowplows are not out yet, so shovels are used to clear a path to the goal, 7,000 feet up. The basic purpose of the journey is to test a new motor oil under operating extremes. The beard of snow clinging to the sump makes this the coldest part of the trip. This is a rare moment, for it's going to get a lot hotter. The most southern, the highest, and now the most eastern part of the mainland, where dawn first greets the coast, Cape Byron in northern New South Wales. Down to Byron Bay for a sample of the Pacific Ocean to carry across the country. With driver Alan Kemp on the left goes Jack Murray, Gelignite Jack, Round Australia trial winner and water fancier. Who took my glass of water? The Gold Coast, it's called, this colourful strip above and below the surface of the South Queensland coast. Behind a glass wall is a good place for this menace. You can see everything here, from a man eating shark to a man feeding dolphins. Some men develop curious affections when the Gold Coast offers so much more. She's only a working girl, a meter maid, feeding coins into parking meters so tourists won't be booked if they dally to see the sights. But away from this heaven on earth, Jack Murray, to where the women wear clothes. Rockhampton, on the Tropic of Capricorn, a city of more than 45,000 people and loading point for the West. There's the promise of fresh adventure ahead for Gelignite Jack, who was driving in the bush before technical man Alan Kemp was born. A wealth of experience goes with photographer Scott Polkinghorne, whose assignments have taken him to all parts of the country. Cameras are loaded, together with supplies of the special oil and food, water, clothing, camping gear, tyres, 30 gallons of petrol, and maps to take the party across Australia. The plan now is to drive through the centre from east to west, something no one has done before. This one segment of the journey is equal to travelling from London across Europe to Baghdad, and that's only a quarter of the distance they'll have to cover. The road runs west along the Tropic of Capricorn. It will lead to new country for all members of the party. This is the 13th journey around or across Australia for Evan Green.
I was wondering if 13 would prove an unlucky number. Our journey was part of a worldwide test of the new oil, and we were to try it under extreme heat. That's why we were doing the wrong thing, heading towards the desert at the height of summer. Western Queensland was being withered by drought. We'd never seen things worse. Most feed had disappeared, and graziers were hauling fodder hundreds of miles by rail. Some of the stock couldn't wait. Conditions were cruel for the bush animals. And if a roo found water, he wasn't inclined to leave. Many had warned us against trying such a journey in summer. The temperature was now above 110 degrees, and we remembered reading stories of people dying of heat. People whose motor cars had broken down on lonely stretches like this beef road 700 miles from the coast. Just about as far west as you can go in Queensland is Urandangi, an odd place to meet an American, Jack Slater, the publican. He's been here for 18 months, and he's one of 3 adults in the town. He likes it because it's quiet. What's the best way out of town?
I reckon you go up here about a half mile and turn right. And about 3 miles out, you'll strike the heaviest bull dust you ever seen. And if you get through, you got good vehicles.
We worked hard in the bull dust. It filled ruts that were 3 feet deep, and we hammered the poor, overloaded cars all the way to the Northern Territory border. Nothing impressive about our entrance, except the temperature. It was 114 in the shade, and not much shade. Off there in the bush, camels, a herd of wild camels. They're descendants of beasts brought from Afghanistan last century, and they've roamed in from the Simpson Desert looking for water. There, a windmill on an underground bore. For us, like the camels, it's a man-made oasis. We were to see many of these, tanks cooling water from deep beneath the surface. They were to keep us alive, just as they sustain the cattle. And this is how the country lives, from underground water. We were soon back in the heat, cursing the sand and remembering that the last time we'd used the shovel was in the snow. The limestone outcrops were rough, but at least they were firmer than the sand. Conditions were difficult, so we took care not to get both cars in trouble. When the going looked doubtful, one car would stop while the other went ahead to make sure the way was clear. We were skirting the Simpson Desert, and here was a reminder. The track was blocked by drift sand, and for hours we had to dig down to solid ground to let the car get underway. We took it in turn. 30 seconds each on the shovel was all we could stand in this heat. Jack tried a wet towel to combat dehydration as we pressed on through sand for another 100 miles. One of the best-known properties in the eastern part of the territory is Hakata. And one of the best-known graziers in all of the north is Quinton Webb. He raises cattle, has few visitors, and as a hobby, collects stones like these that lie scattered around his property. Quinton Webb's collection comes mainly from the Harts Range area, which lies along a good made-up road that runs all the way to the bitumen near Alice Springs. The bitumen road, lifeline of the north, and for us, a symbol of the fact that we were halfway across and back in safe territory. We had reached the centre, and for the first time in 1,500 miles, we could afford to squander our water.
Here is the face of ancient Australia. He is an elder of the Arunta tribe, a proud man whose forebears lived and hunted here long before the white man came to Alice Springs. There is a dignity about these people in keeping with a race who have lived in these surroundings for centuries. He was born in a hut just beyond the gap in the ranges and knows no other area. Many of his people still cling to the habit of centuries, cooking in the riverbed and living in their makeshift wurleys. The white man clings to his ways too. He is not nomadic, so he builds to stay. The Royal Flying Doctor Service cares for the health of the centre's small but widespread population from this base. Catering for tourists and clients, now spread throughout the world, are a number of galleries located in town. They specialize in selling watercolors painted by Aboriginal artists who find their subjects where they live, as in the Todd River on the edge of the Alice. The artist is Claude Panker, a pupil of Albert Namatjira and currently one of the 6 most successful Aboriginal painters. As with most of his race, he paints only landscapes. A 10-year drought has blighted the territory, but its end is threatened on the day the party must head towards Ayers Rock, 300 miles away. The first showers bring joy to locals, but not to travellers. The road is flooded to the south and west. The going is treacherous. There's a lesson here. The sides are too soft, but where the water lies, the bottom is firm. The road is flooded for 30 miles, and Allen stands ready to abandon ship just in case there's a big hole. Now a new threat looms in the west, a gigantic dust storm mingling with approaching rain. With the storm moving in, the little car falls into a trap. A front wheel has sunk in a hole, and a concealed mulga root is wound around the tire. Beneath the water, the road is as slippery as greasy glass. The Mini is caught like a rabbit in a trap. Finally, the risk is taken, and Big Brother moves into the danger area to attempt rescue. Both out, now go, onto the rock before the rain comes too. You are witnessing one of the wonders of the world, rain at Ayers Rock, a storm over a landmark that is almost perpetually dry. For only minutes does the water flow, polishing the antique surface a fraction more, briefly forming Australia's highest waterfalls, tumbling more than 1,100 feet to the desert. The rock is enormous. Covering 1,200 acres, it measures 5.5 miles around the base. And as the storm breaks, it presents a freshly washed face to the setting sun. Most honeymoon couples drive or fly to the rock. This couple walked for 70 miles to seek shelter at the tiny pub. 70 miles without food. They are pigeon jarrers, and according to custom, she was betrothed to an old man. He wanted her for his wife, so he took her and walked. They cannot go back. If they do, her husband will be speared. That is the law of the tribe. Aborigines may survive with little water, but white men cannot, and water will be needed for the next stage. Away from Ayers Rock and its flooded roads on a desert crossing that will cover 890 miles. Fuel, water, food, the cars are heavily laden for the longest and most hazardous part of the journey. At first, the track is clear. White men are not allowed in here without a special permit. It's part of an Aboriginal reserve, now virtually deserted, that sprawls across 44,000 square miles of the Northern Territory alone. It is in the loneliest, most deserted region of Australia. Speed drops to 10 miles an hour. Engines work harder in low gear and operating temperatures rise alarmingly. The Peterman Ranges close in as though shutting out the world. Everyone now realizes that they're doing more than just testing a new oil. They are risking their lives. They are on their own, completely. "14 years before, Scott Polkinghorne had come to the Petermans as photographer with an expedition searching for the now legendary Lassiter's Reef. A skilled bushman and prospector, Harold Bell Lassiter, claimed to have struck gold somewhere in these hills. Somewhere. He searched for his reef in vain. He spent his last days in this cave, starving, and then staggered out to the dry sands of the Hull River. There, Lassiter perished. He was not the first to die, or the last in this land that promises wealth, but gives little food or water. It's an eerie sensation camping in these ranges. No risks can be taken, and as the vehicles mean survival, a thorough servicing is carried out. This air filter has been doing its job keeping dirt out of the motor, but it will have to be replaced, and a new element is fitted. A sample is taken from an oil change and tagged for later analysis. Everything is carefully done. The fresh oil going in is accurately measured and details are entered in the log. All work becomes difficult in the heat. Minds operate a little slower, and just walking becomes an effort. But vital here on a sandy crossing, for a wrong approach could mean a bog, and a bog in this heat could mean disaster. Pressures in the tyres have been lowered to increase traction. They take fearful punishment, but they keep going. Some of the washaways are severe. If you haven't got the size, you've just got to try harder. Into Western Australia, and a surprise. A road, a real graded road, if a little the worse for lack of use. It was cut through 7 years before by a team from the Woomera Rocket Range. It's called the Gun Barrel Highway, and it runs through the fearsome Gibson's Desert. Explorer Gibson achieved posterity the hard way. 90 years before, he wandered to his death somewhere in this area. His remains have never been found, but then, no one ever looked. On the fringe of the desert is the Warburton Mission, haven for 400 Aborigines. This old man is steeped in the tradition of a dry land where use of water for anything but drinking is sheer waste. The mission is here to educate, and the older boys seem happy, probably because they've finished school. At the mission, they can't remember the last visitor from the desert. What's the road like to the west? After what you've been over, it'll be a cup of tea.
I was tired, and so were the others when we finally reached the old gold mining town of Laverton. It's not big, but it was the first town we'd seen since Alice Springs, and that was 1,200 miles back. Do you know, we'd had 17 days in succession with the temperature up around the 110-degree mark, or better, and that takes it out of you. December the 15th, and the last stage to the coast. The temperature was 114, and we had 809 miles to go. We had hoped for a better road. Nearing Carnarvon, we suddenly found that Jack, in the Mini, was making a race of it. With the bitumen in sight, he wanted to be the first to reach the Indian Ocean. Carnarvon, 3,672 miles from the Pacific, and the end of the first east-west crossing. Almost an historic moment, with an appropriate reward for the man who wanted to be the first to the Indian Ocean. Lying at the edge of the continent, but focused on space, is the Carnarvon tracking station. It's a joint Australian-American venture, and we were told that its towering instruments are able to pinpoint the exact location of a satellite in space to within 7 yards. When we arrived, they were following the first Gemini astronauts, measuring their speed with an accuracy of within 1/3 of a mile per hour. The skies were to bring us a new menace, for summer is the time of the tropical monsoons. We had to try to reach Darwin before the rains of the wet season swept in. So the race begins. In the first day, we cover more than 1,000 miles. Darwin lies 2,116 miles away. And on the way, we must cross some big rivers. Rain, and they're impassable. The first is the Fitzroy. The crossing is still dry, but the river is flowing and rising. In another few days, maybe more, the crossing will be closed. We speed on into the Kimberleys. Over the border in the Northern Territory, the signs are more ominous. This is the Baines River. Normally it's dry, but rain has been falling upstream. Fingers crossed, because now there's no turning back. Crossing these rising rivers is a little like burning your bridges. If the road ahead is blocked, we probably won't get back. But then the only other way open to Darwin involves a detour south of more than 5,000 miles. So we press on towards the Victoria River. But the Victoria River, biggest and last of our obstacles, is up and running fast. The rocky approach to the crossing has been scoured away and the concrete causeway is well awash. It's deeper and, more important, faster on the far side. We've come 1,800 miles without rest from Carnarvon, but we can't cross the river. Has our luck run out? For 20 hours, we waited. We'd been on our own for so long, we'd forgotten other people use the roads up here. This is a high-clearance four-wheel drive truck operated by the Commonwealth Government, and its arrival spells salvation to us. The gear goes on board, and the Mini goes behind. The rope is short, for the problem is not to drive through this depth of water, but to avoid being swept off the slimy causeway. Now it's the 1800's turn to try the crossing. The wash on the side of the car will be the real hazard. We were told that only a week before, a four-wheel drive vehicle had been swept away. Off with the rope and up on our own. The front wheels haul the car out and we're clear of the last barrier to the north.
The far north is like no other part of Australia. This buffalo is one of thousands roaming the plains, all descended from a herd imported from nearby Java last century. Once hunted ruthlessly for their hide, they're shy of man, although just a little curious. The magpie geese are always on the move, but the anthills never change, always pointing north and south. The bottle tree survives the dry season by storing water in its trunk. Now it can relax, for the wet season has arrived in Darwin. The rainfall at Australia's most northern city exceeds 50 inches a year, and most of it falls during the monsoonal wet. Darwin has been reached without a day to spare. South, east, west, and now north. All the goals have been reached and the cars are still running well after more than 10,000 miles of really hard going. The last samples are prepared for dispatch to the laboratories down south. They're going by air, but the drivers have a final stage to cover to complete a journey equal to halfway around the world. South, in a hurry along the Stewart Highway, out of the wet north. And into the dry centre. A weird area this, with few sights stranger than the balancing boulders they call the Devil's Marbles. Paradoxically, a Devil's Marble rests on the grave of a man of God, Flynn of the Inland, whose monument is this church in Alice Springs. He was a pioneer who wandered the centre, understanding its loneliness, yet marvelling at its stark beauty. It is a harsh land, an ancient land where man is still a groping newcomer and an unwelcome intruder. Those who enter and dare may still justly be called pioneers.